Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
NFL report cards are out and the Chargers are surging under Jim Harbaugh. Also, a half-court buzzer beater won a huge game in college basketball, and the Titans are more likely to trade out of the number one overall pick than draft a quarterback.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Los Angeles Chargers put together a solid year under Jim Harbaugh in his first year as the Chargers head coach, and that reflected a lot in the NFLPA report card. Here with me to talk about that, Dan Wade, one of the hosts over at Locked On Chargers. And Dan, I know for the Chargers, they were looking for a culture reset after the Brandon Staley era. They bring in Jim Harbaugh, they bring in Joe Ortiz, and they certainly got that. The NFLPA puts out a player survey every year under, it's anonymous. Players don't have their names plastered on it, but the Chargers, they improved drastically from where they were at this time last season. Can you kind of go through where the Chargers graded out Jim Harbaugh and the whole organization? Because seeing such an improvement must be music to Chargers fans' ears.
It's definitely music to my ears because, the first two inaugural NFLPA report cards were not exactly a shining light on the Chargers specifically. Last year they ranked 30th in overall grade. This year they ranked 5th. There was not a single grade that they got in 2024 that they didn't improve on in 2025. And it was sweeping changes. And Jim Harbaugh obviously is at the center of it. But the other big part of it that we knew even last year was going to go way up was the fact that the Chargers opened up the Bolt, which is their new $500+ million training facility that has pretty state-of-the-art facilities across the board. Last year the complaints were we don't even have enough cold tubs or hot tubs to get their treatment that we need. I think 16% of players felt they didn't get enough one-on-one training time, which is pretty crazy because I think at the NFL level, you just kind of assume if someone needs training help and someone needs to get help back on the field, that their team is going to provide that, right? So close to 20% of a fifth of your team not being able to have that is a pretty big deal. And a lot of that kind of tangible part of the NFLPA report card really scared me last year, but something that you knew was going to get better this year with the Bolt. And they went from the 32nd in food freshness. That's embarrassing. Whether you have a nice facility or not, you have control over what you put in front of your players. So the fact that the overall taste and overall freshness of their food is, recently is last year ranked 32nd, that's pretty alarming. So they definitely, I think the NFLPA report cards work to the extent of, hey, some of these shamed teams are changing their ways a little bit. So a big part of it was the Bolt and the new training facility. But a bigger part of it, I think, too, overall was Jim Harbaugh and the effect that he's had, and also Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach that they took with them from Michigan, and what he's been able to do, and that side of things really helped as well.
How did you kind of see the culture shift last year in Los Angeles when you're talking about Jim Harbaugh coming in and really putting his footprint down and saying, hey, this is what we're going to be as a team. This is how we're going to run things. And it clearly worked out for the better because it feels like the players bought into it. And it feels like the Chargers now, when there was a lot of uncertainty in the Brandon Staley era of just what comes next, now it feels like there's an actual plan with a leader at the helm that can take on all sorts of challenges.
It does, and I think you see it a lot at the press conferences before, especially towards the end of Brandon Staley. It was not a good sight for him. He was melting down a little bit at the podium, and you can see with Jim Harbaugh, for the most part, it just rolls right off of his back. He's heard everything. You're not going to make an accusation to Jim Harbaugh that he hasn't heard before or can kind of spin it into his own weird Harbaughism one way or the other. I think the bigger thing on the field, though, was just the limited amount of charging, because that's what it is in Chargers land. When you blow a big fourth quarter lead, when you lose to teams that you shouldn't lose to, all of that can be wrapped up in charging. And the Chargers did have a very easy schedule this year, and did a lot of the league because there were so many bad teams in the league this year. But beating bad teams on their schedule has never been a forte of the Chargers. So the fact that this season, really the only game they dropped to a clearly inferior team was one game against the Cardinals, and then being able to take care of business against every other non-playoff team that they played in 2024, that's a big deal. There were no letdowns. There were no giant fourth quarter comebacks that happened against them. And I think overall, you just looked at the amount of conditioning, the amount of toughness and physicality that this team was able to kind of take on, even in year one of Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz, before they've really been able to fully shape it in their image. I think there was a lot of different ways that you could tell that, hey, this culture is different. It's trending in the right direction.
And now I know that the combine for the Chargers is really important in terms of finding that next wave of great Charger players. And for Jim Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz, they're going to be looking at a bunch of different options. What needs do you feel like the Chargers have to address in this draft class? Because in order to take that next step, having rookies that can contribute can be a huge part of that.
It is huge. And I think the one thing that Chargers fans can kind of help themselves sleep at night with is the fact that Joe Ortiz got 4 instant contributors last year, 2 starting outside corners in the 5th round, a great right tackle in his rookie season in Joe Alt, and who was already one of the elite receivers in the NFL last year in Ladd McConkey. So there is, I think, a lot of faith and positivity kind of brimming right now that this is an important part of the Chargers process now, and it's a place where they can build the foundation for this team. Now, what they do in free agency is going to have a lot to do with it, right? And I know that's the easy answer here, but it depends how they decide to attack it. If it were me, I would focus most of my free agency period bringing back the key players because they have 26 unrestricted free agents, and big guys like Khalil Mack and J.K. Dobbins aren't currently under contract. But the other part of it is solidifying the interior of the offensive line in free agency where you can find proven commodities and also a weapon for Justin Herbert. I don't think they can go into the draft having to get the weapon there, having the big upgrade of the offense come through the draft and a non-proven player. I don't think they can go into it, and I think it would pigeonhole them in the draft if they wait for that. That being said, for me, in the draft, I think defensive tackle, something that a lot of, Daniel Jeremiah, 24 defensive tackle starter grades that he's given out already in this class. That feels like one of those positions you don't want to miss out on in this class. I'd say the other big thing for them this week is looking at the edge rushers, because it doesn't feel like a huge issue right now because Khalil Mack, you're hoping, can come back. Joey Bosa is still under contract, but there's a non-zero chance that neither of those guys are back with the Chargers in 2025. When you think of Bosa's $35 million cap hit and Khalil Mack, per Joe Ortiz's words, wanting to test free agency for the first time in his career because he's always been under contract and has always signed extensions. He's never got to taste that. That scares me a little bit, but I think it also means that the edge rusher position is something that might be a lot higher on the Chargers board than some people might think.
You can stay up to date on the Los Angeles Chargers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Chargers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Your Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, Michigan State pulled off a wild road win with an even more insane shot. Before we get to that, the Pistons are firing on all cylinders. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Later today, the Nuggets take a trip to Milwaukee, where Denver is favored by 3. The Lakers are 5-point favorites over the Wolves in Los Angeles, and the Magic are 6-point home dogs versus the Warriors. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make everyone more FanDuel the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Last time the Pistons were any good, the last time they finished the season over 500, you'd have to go all the way back to 2015, and now the Pistons are 33-26, winners of 8 out of their last 10 games. They dominated the Celtics tonight behind some very tough defense.
With apologies to Adam Silver, this was definitely a case of the Pistons wanting this game a whole lot more than the Boston Celtics. This was a big deal for the Pistons, riding a 7-game winning streak, beating only one winning team in that stretch. So the champs came in and the Pistons wanted it. They looked like it. They were attacking. They attacked the offensive glass. They defended their butts off. They made life incredibly difficult for the Celtics. Asar Thompson was a menace. 5 steals. Jason Tatum was having trouble getting by him. The Celtics, aside from a second quarter barrage of 11 3-pointers, 9 in a row, to close the second quarter, this was all Detroit. They played incredibly hard. They played incredibly well. Malik Beasley was hitting everything and letting the Celtics know about it. Celtics did get a good performance from Derek White. Peyton Pritchard helped keep them in the game for a little bit, but that entire second half was all Pistons, and that is an impressive win for the Pistons. Celtics, a third game in 4 nights. Kristaps Porzingis coming in off of the illness. They looked tired. They looked slow. They didn't have anything to dip into. No Jaylen Brown in this game as well. No Luke Cornett off the bench. So a tough one for the Celtics, but a game that you can absolutely flush and move on because they face the Cavs on Friday.
The Auburn Tigers absolutely crushed the Ole Miss Rebels with All-American Johnny Broome dropping 24 in the win.
Well, I'll tell you this, the first 10 minutes of this basketball game, Auburn on both ends of the floor played as well as they have all year in a conference game.
Yep.
Defensively, they were smothering Ole Miss. Ole Miss likes to get in their sets really, really quickly, and Auburn was not allowing that to happen. And then offensively, Auburn just couldn't miss from the free throw line or the three-point line or field goals. And look, I'm just going to say this. Anybody that doesn't think Janai Broome is the national player of the year after this performance
Ignorant at this point.
is Ray Charles.
The NFL is considering changes to its regular season overtime rules to reduce the advantage for teams that win the coin toss. The league's competition committee recently acknowledged the current format, where teams that receive the ball first have won 56.8% of the overtime games since 2017, need to be addressed. Possible solutions include adopting the playoff overtime format, where both teams are guaranteed a possession, or extending the overtime period to 15 minutes. Anything, just anything that's different from what they currently have. Michigan State Spartans got a huge road win over number 16 Maryland on one of the craziest buzzer beaters so far this season. Locked On Michigan State host Matt Sheehan provided his reaction postgame.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, you fellow Trey Holloman disciples, how on earth are we doing on this blessed Wednesday night? Because, well, that's right, the Michigan State Spartans, they pick up a win in College Park. Well, 3 and precisely 3 more points than Maryland scored. I don't know the final score. To be quite honest, I blacked completely out. And not off alcohol, of course. It was a water-only night here at the Sheehan household. But what did we just watch, Sam? Sam Martin, by the way, friend of the podcast, great basketball mind. What the hell was that? What did we just watch? Oh, my God.
I almost think about what that was like for a Maryland fan. That was the all-time like guillotine game for Maryland. You're behind, you can't win. Oh, we're falling. And then we just claw our way back. And at the last second, as the Viper is taunting his opponent walking around the arena, whoop. Trey Holloman from 55 feet crushes their eyeballs out of their skull.
Right in front of that wall student section, who, by the way, fantastic student section, fantastic crowd. I have nothing bad to say about Maryland, their program, their fans. I don't care for their head coach, obviously, but that's because of a very petty child that remembers what he did with Seton Hall and Miles Powell back in 2019 or 18 or 2012. I don't really remember the year, quite frankly. But look, my big, maybe hot take of the game, maybe I'm just a little too drunk off the green Kool-Aid right now, but hey, you know what? After you win on a half-court buzzer beater on the road, you don't get to say this quite often, but here I go, Sam. Are you ready? Are you sitting down for this one? Feel like, as ugly as it was for Michigan State on the offensive side of the ball, feel like Michigan State deserved to win that game. I mean, they had full control in the second half, of course, save for the little mini meltdown at the end. That wasn't a great time. The offense never really got rolling, but in Michigan State fashion, they played great defense the whole game. They only held Maryland to just, 1 or 2 field goals in the last 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I mean, I think MSU, it sounds ridiculous after a half-court buzzer beater to steal one on the road. I still think that they were the better team here, and this was against a team that a lot said was the best starting 5 in the Big Ten. You did it in their own barn. Do I need to pump the brakes a little bit and realize that, no, we got pretty damn lucky this game?
Izzo agrees with you. He said in the post-game interview, he said, that was a lucky shot, but don't say we didn't deserve to win that game, because MSU did outplay them for pretty much the entire way. And yeah, it was close. They started to pull away with about 5 minutes left. 5 minutes and 24 seconds was when Jace Richardson hit the shot to put him up 9 points. And that's one where you can look at the post-game win probability chart and see you're at about 91%. And they did play very poorly down the stretch, and they played very poorly at different times during the game on offense. I thought Maryland did a good job with some scheme at the end where MSU started to spam the Jace Richardson high pick and roll, and they went to kind of a 3-2 zone look to take them out of that. What I think MSU can learn from this, and I hope Jace Richardson can learn from this, is that he was giving up the ball and then retreating to the corner, which I'm sure is his normal assignment within the flow of their offense. When you give up the ball at the top, make a cut to the corner, get out of the way, let Holloman cook a little bit. But the way that especially MSU's offense, and really after a great game against Michigan, Holloman for a lot of the game until the end of it did not play very well offensively. Some great defense from him, as is true of really the entire team. They just let Maryland take them out of what was really working. And hopefully that's something that they can learn. He can be a little bit more assertive in those situations in the future, come back up. No, give me the ball. I need to be the person who's making plays, because really he, at the very beginning of the game, when MSU took control right out of the gate, and then when they took control again in the second half, it was Richardson who really, I think at this point, without a doubt, is the clear best offensive player on the team. But this was just a blocking and tackling, running the ball, stopping the run, gritty effort by Michigan State. I mean, the offensive rebounds in the game, it was something like 13-4, including some really big ones down the stretch to take control of the game. And just you see in that game the way that this construction of Michigan State, playing two centers all the time, crashing the boards really hard on both ends, really getting back to an old school brand of basketball, the way that can still work for you in creating so many extra possessions. I mean, the field goal attempts in the game, Maryland took 48 field goal attempts and 26 free throws. Michigan State took 65 field goal attempts and 12 free throws.
Thank you.
That's the game.
Yeah.
You can stay up to date all year on the Michigan State Spartans by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Spartans on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. The Titans trade their number one pick away. The Tennessee Titans have a lot of options with their number one overall pick. Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland believes that Tennessee trading the pick away is more likely than them drafting a quarterback.
I'm boots on the ground with the Titans every day, so I have my thoughts, and it's not far away from what you're saying right now. But what I do want to go over is the quote from Titans' new general manager, Mike Borgonzi. And Borgonzi came from the Kansas City Chiefs organization this offseason. He said, quote, anytime you have the number one pick, it's always going to be a topic of conversation to trade. We've had some phone calls, and I'll keep those phone calls close to the vest. But yeah, we've had some phone calls. Look, I think the reality is when you need a quarterback, and there are quarterbacks at the top of the draft, the instant thing that people say is, well, they'd be dumb to pass on a quarterback. But I think the conversation around the Titans is that roster is pretty far away from being able to support a quarterback. And someone who's watched the Titans for a long time, you've seen Vince Young and Jake Locker and Marcus Mariota all be high picks in the draft and still fail because the infrastructure around them wasn't necessarily ready to support them. So I think if you're the Tennessee Titans and if you have organizational patience, like that the general manager, or that the president of football operations, and that the controlling owner, Amy Adams Strunk, is going to give you patience, then I agree with you. There's no need to rush the quarterback. And with all of the needs that the Tennessee Titans have on the roster, all at premium positions too, wide receiver, edge, offensive tackle, like it only makes sense for the Titans to leverage this moment to trade down, collect as many picks as they can possibly get. The Titans don't have a third round pick this year. They have 35-1 and no other picks in the top 100. That is not a great place to be for a rebuilding team. So this number one pick is the best asset that you possibly have that you could parlay into more picks to help fix your broken roster.
If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, the NFL Combine gets underway. So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.